Hello, everybody. Welcome back to this year's tropical update for September 26th. We're currently watching Category 1 Hurricane Ian making its way towards Cuba, then Florida, as a rapidly intensifying tropical cyclone at this point in time, likely to become a major hurricane here shortly and make life-threatening impacts to much of western Cuba as well as much of the Florida Peninsula. We're also watching Invest 99 now. We won't talk much about that today, but now up to high chance information from the Hurricane Center. As we can see here, significant risks of storm surge as well as wind, and perhaps later on we'll have rain in this significant category as well due to Ian over western Cuba and portions of western Florida. As at this point in time, Cuba is expecting 9 to 14 feet of storm surge in that western Cuba area. In the United States coast near Tampa Bay is currently expecting 5 to 10 feet of storm surge. Again, that's as things stand right now. That's likely to increase with time. Rainfall at this point through the next 3 days in western Florida is expected to reach about probably somewhere in the neighborhood of I think 10 to 18 inches at the most within the next 3 days. Note that this storm, as we'll talk about it here shortly, will be moving very slowly. So lots of rain is expected, especially on the east side of the storm. Of course, wind is also a concern with Ian, not the primary concern. Water is the primary concern, as I've been trying to make it. Storm surge and rain is the primary focus with Ian, but major hurricane winds possible over western Cuba. A little less likely in western Florida, but still possible. I'll talk about that now. Here's Category 1 Hurricane Ian making its way up towards the Isle of Youth in western Cuba right now. I'll bring my cursor over here. Here is Grand Cayman Island, where now a tropical storm warning is effect. Tropical storm watch for these two Cayman Islands out here. Hurricane warning, much of western Cuba, the Isle of Man, or the Isle of Youth as well. Maybe I said that wrong earlier. Oops. And then tropical storm warnings elsewhere. As we can see, those watches and warnings here on this graphic as well. Tropical storm warning now in effect for much of the Florida Keys. A tropical storm warning in effect for a few more of the Florida Keys, as well as much of South Florida, Lake Okeechobee, and a hurricane watch is also in effect for central West Florida. Please note, and this is extremely important, it reaches the Keys Tuesday night. It doesn't make landfall until Friday early morning. So basically, it's near and affecting Florida with rain for the good chunk of the back half of this week. That's most clearly seen Wednesday to Thursday morning. The thing hardly moves. Even Wednesday night to Thursday morning, it's just moving. And note that the storm surge is coming this way, straight into the coast on the southeast side of the storm here, into Tampa Bay, into Florida Bay. Those areas, all of course, prone to water. And so a lot of impacts expected there. Beyond the wind, yes, it's weakening, but the wind field is growing. It's going to be a lot of tropical storm force winds over a very large area. It's going to be a lot of storm surge, as we see 9 to 14 over Cuba, and as you'll see here in a second, 5 to 10 already expected in Florida, and that number could go up, and I would not be surprised if it does. Rainfall is a big concern. In western Cuba, again, 6 to 10 inches, isolated to 16. In the United States, much the same amounts of rain, as I'll show you here now. Winds at 85 miles an hour. This thing is expected to reach 140 miles an hour at its peak. Again, it will weaken before making landfall. If it makes landfall on the north half of Florida, if it makes landfall in the south half of Florida, it may not have time to weaken, and it will be moving very slowly. As I mentioned, Tampa Bay, areas south down to Florida Bay also need to be keeping a very close eye on this storm. Charlotte Harbor, those areas are where you're going to get the most storm surge, the most rain, and further to the north near Tampa and the Anclote River. Those areas are where the the storm at this point is likely to make landfall. So again, these areas right here are where we're watching very, very closely for the U.S. And in a similar way, in Western Cuba, almost that like whole portion of the peninsula is where we're watching. This is the whole peninsula, part of the peninsula of Florida. We're watching very closely, but areas elsewhere are still getting rain. As you see, almost the entire peninsula, not including the panhandle, is going to get over 4 inches of rain over the next 3 days. And remember, this storm is staying there for the next 5 days. Look at the cone. The cone's here, the depression's up here. That's still rain in North Florida Saturday morning, 5 days from now. So rain over the next 5 days. This only shows the next 3 of them. Storm surge down here as well, 2 to 4 feet along the Keys, 3 to 5 heading up in to Bonita Beach, and then more and more as we head to the north towards the center of the storm. And again, I would not be surprised if those numbers increase. As we see, also increasing are the winds. Rapid intensification is expected with this storm, likely to high-end Cat 3 or low-end Cat 4 in about 2 days from now is when it will hit peak intensity. Again, that's when it's about even with the Everglades, and then it could make landfall anywhere between 3 and 4 days from now. If it makes landfall at 3 days from now, then it'll move into Florida south of Tampa Bay. But at this point, the consensus, almost all the models take it in north of Tampa Bay, paralleling this little cutout of the coast, which is, again, extremely dangerous for storm surge and rain over much of these areas. Again, that's all I really need to say about this storm. Watch out for the rain. If you're in the Tampa Bay area, be extremely careful with this one. Again, wind doesn't, it kills in tropical storms, but it's not the killer. The killer is water. Water kills. So life-threatening impacts expected over Western Cuba and Western Florida. That's the way to sum it up. Invest 99L over the Central Atlantic, 70% chance of formation within the next 5 days. Not expected to affect land. Thank goodness. Here is the European model, very quiet over the next 7 days, except for, of course, Hurricane Ian making its way likely into Florida, as you can see by a majority of the ensemble members. The same is reflected by the GFS's opinion of Ian, and it also is a bit more inclined to have 99L develop. And that's all I have for today. Again, if you're in Western Cuba, your time to preparing is almost over. If you're in Western Florida, your time's coming soon, and realize that it will be several days of rain and wind over much of the Florida Peninsula, regardless of where this thing makes landfall. So be prepared for hurricane and tropical storm conditions throughout the area, and stay safe, guys. That's all for now. Chris Dixon for Catholic Media.